This presentation is a matter of life and death. Exploring the conceptualization of social materiality in the context of critical care. Presented by the Silver Team, Cohort 51. The author is Dr. Matthew Jones from the MIS Quarterly, September 2014. The audience is primarily for academia. However, the subject matter is to be flowed down to business leaders. The model associated with this research is the theory of social materiality. The 5 basic tenets, which we will go into later, are materiality, inseparability, relationality, performativity, and practices. Dr. Jones utilizes a real-world critical care unit for the subject matter. Dr. Jones is a university lecturer at Darwin College. His PhD, as well as his research interests, are in information systems, social and organizational change. Dr. Jones has a wider range of experience across many corporations. However, his primary interest is in hospitals. Dr. Jones is well publicized. His articles have appeared across not just the MIS Quarterly, but different other journals. This is a schematic of the layout of the beds in a critical care unit. Most critical care units consist of 8 beds. The patients are usually those which have went through such operations as liver transplants and heart transplants. Usually there's a head nurse at the front of the room and 2 nurses to care for the patients. The 8 beds are divided into 4 pods of 2. The pods consist of the 2 beds, the devices to help the patients, and the trolley with the charts or the CIS terminal. The CIS terminal is our primary focus in today's presentation.
The scope of the article is to present a critical analysis of the notions that characterize sociomateriality both separately and in combination to determine what insights they may offer for information systems research. There are 5 notions that characterize sociomateriality. They are materiality, inseparability, relationality, performativity, and practices. Materiality is a concern to establish materiality as central to our understanding of contemporary organizations. Inseparability is an ontological claim about the inextricable entanglement of the social and the material. Relationality is an anti-essentialist rejection of the notion that entities have inherent properties, viewing these rather as relational. Performativity is a view of the relations and boundaries between the social and material as being enacted rather than given. And practices are a focus on practices rather than the discourses or cognitions. And now we have the forms of materiality from the CCU case and examples of each. Physicality of IT artifacts, and an example is the size and resolution of data on the computer screen. Physicality of material artifacts. Example is the personal documentation supplements of the formal record. Physicality of context of IS issues. An example is that nighttime lighting levels make it difficult to use keyboards. Non-physical materiality. And an example is a clinical information system at the CCU that enables patient records to be accessed remotely. Finally, digital materiality, with the example that clinical information systems integrate data from multiple sources, creating a comprehensible representation of the patient.
Does the literature seem reasonable? Does it encompass enough literature? The literature does seem reasonable. It explains the idea that humans and machines are interdependent of one another. And the article sought to expand the knowledge on social materiality, which is very seldom discussed or written about in IS or IT journals and publications. The literature explained the topic using 5 points: materiality, inseparability, relationality, performativity, and practice. And it utilized the example of the critical care unit as a means to show the relationship between the social, the medical staff, and the material, the new CIS system. Readers are able to grasp an understanding of social materiality through the explanative charts and examples the author provides, and the article encompasses enough literature to explain social materiality. The literature cites various authors who have contributed to the study and expansion of social materiality. However, the author expounds heavily on the research of Orlikowski, who has been cited by various other authors, whether directly or indirectly. And Orlikowski credits the origin of the concept of social materiality to Moll and Suchman. These two tables provide a breakdown of inseparability and relationality, respectively, utilizing our case study, the critical care unit, as an example. One form of inseparability is the interpenetration of humans and machines, addressing the connectivity between the social and the material. The example from the case: patient survival depends on the insertion of devices into their body. To the point of relationality, properties of entities, addressing the relationship between the social and the material. The case study example: use of a cardboard kidney dish as a temporary notepad depends on a staff member's recognition of its capability to be used for this purpose, but this would not be possible if the dish was made of a material that could not be written on.
The structure is very well laid out and fluid in presentation. The introduction helps the reader know what to anticipate in the article. The key notions of sociomateriality acknowledges the idea that there are different types of technology and ways to define it. It also describes the 5 notions of sociomateriality, so the reader will have an understanding of the concept from different points of view. Further incorporating the definitions of materiality, inseparability, relationality, and performativity help to set up the way sociomateriality is practiced. After describing, explaining, and putting into practice the 5 notions, questioning and countering is done to see both sides of the equation of sociomateriality. Once the reader is familiar and comfortable with the concepts, methodology is the next step in applying it to a specific setting, which in this case is one of a critical care unit. Multiple charts, graphs, and visuals are submitted to qualify and validate the data and concepts of the critical care unit setting. After the presentation of the data and supplemental materials, an analysis is done with respects to inseparability, relationality, materiality, and performativity to bring the article full circle to the key notions of sociomateriality. More charts, data, and examples were brought into the discussion to support earlier definitions and concepts. The conclusion wraps up the article nicely and hits on the major points presented at the beginning and throughout the article. References were put at the end. In the next chart, you see performativity and elements. In Table 5, 3 forms of performativity in the CCU case are given as examples. The first one is models enact the phenomena they seek to explain. The second is boundaries are enacted in practice. The third being control is enacted through visibility. In Table 6, you see 2 examples of elements of practice addressed in sociomateriality. The first element of practice exampled is affect, which means the perceived changes to the norms of nursing practice evoke strong emotions. The second element of practice in the table is embodiment. An example of that is care practices involve routinized patterns of bodily movement.
The authors were successful in accomplishing their stated purpose. While the notions both individually and collectively do show a distinct and logical account of the relationship between social and the material, they may be useful in information systems research. Seeing the examples shown of how they work hand in hand allow for a more widespread way of thinking. The article addressed the materiality, inseparability, relationality, performativity, and practices to broaden the reader's perspective of social material. The intro shows readers that social material has been used since and maybe before the 1950s, but has increasingly become a topic of discussion after 2007, as all the journal articles that are in organizational studies and information systems were brought about after this time, with more than 80% of them coming after 2011, which shows that there has been a lot of research on this term lately. Key notions of social materiality introduce the readers to what social materiality is used to do. The 5 interrelated notions described are seen and understood. In the inseparability and relationality section, they are addressing the fact that technology is interdependent on humans. The technology on its own is only as good as the person that is using it. The interaction between human and technology is what makes social materiality work. The performativity talked about how social material could be used to monitor employee performance and training, or disciplinary measures could be put into place immediately. Certain aspects of practice are changed with social materiality. It was documented in this article that with technology changes come the obstacles of making sure the workflow is adjusted. The documentation in the table showing the articles of organizational studies and information systems journals that refer to social materiality solidify the notion that it is being looked at as being a useful segment in information systems research. The authors provide nice visuals to help readers understand the relationship of the social and the material and how they work together to advance the understanding of employee and create options that without it they may not see. Points important to business leaders. Business leaders are able to understand how various IT systems and concepts would affect processes and employees. Business leaders will understand the positive effects of IT systems, such as streamlining activities and processes, and the drawbacks, such as taking additional steps and new concerns developing the IT system implementation. The article has value in that it shows the relationship between entities which by necessity must coexist in order to create and maintain a business. Describe social materiality through the 5 notions in a way that business leaders can apply to their own companies. Also identifies benefits and possible improvements through the transition. The article puts a spin on the perspective showing business leaders that although a concept may have some value for one entity or business, it may not hold that same value for others. Shows the importance of business leaders knowing their business and what extra personal helpings the business needs to thrive. Lastly, it punctuates the idea of a business leader being involved in project management for their business' best interest. This article provides an adequate explanation of the relationship between IT and people. It illustrates how technology is interdependent on people, explains the transition from the early relationship between technology and organizations and how they were viewed independently to now when social materiality proposes that they are not separate entities but inextricably fused. The article states that the concept of materiality in organizational research is the predominant focus of information systems and organizational literature. In the article, the author shows that even though the material change, you still have to stay cognizant of the quality of job performance that is affected by the new technology. The example with the hospital upgrades can have the employee falling in a trap of being a data analyst instead of performing the quality care. This article gives examples of how the social and the materiality go hand in hand in not only making the changes in technology, but having to do things like rearrange workspaces in order to complement the changes in technology, which is integral for business owners to adapt to.